Hello and welcome to this perpetual check patterns video. So basically, perpetual check can be a pretty good tool when you're behind in material, when you're losing basically, and you want to save a draw. So I'll try and do 10 puzzles here, and at least 10, depending, how many, or excuse me, how quick we go through each one of these puzzles. The first problem here, black has just captured a pawn and gone ahead even more material because they have this extra bishop as well. So we're looking for a perpetual check pattern where we basically attack the king and chase him back and forth, repeating the position 3 times and going for a draw. All right, so since it's perpetual check, of course you want to look for checks first. So take a look here, pause the video at any time if you need to think longer. All right, here we go. So where do we have a check? Obviously we don't want to take the bishop or the king will just capture us. So we don't want to do that. So let's go here, check the king, and then we can start running the king back and forth. So check, then we can go here, check. So I guess another option might have been for the king to go here. So maybe that would work. And then if we checked here, the bishop could block. But then we would be able to go up here and check on the back rank. So that's another possibility. All right, well, let's move on to the next one here. All right, now something else you want to do, when you're solving these puzzles or in your own game, make sure you're aware of the piece count, who is ahead in material. So here, if we look at this, we're ahead by 1 pawn. We have, let's see, rooks and queens. Our opponent is ahead with this bishop. So a bishop for a pawn, not good for us. So we're looking for that perpetual check. How can we do that? And this one might be a little trickier. So you want to look at all the checks first. Now, do we even have many checks here? There might only be one. Let's see. How about here? We attack with the rook. Now, if the king were to run, then possibly now, first, let's look at what would happen if the bishop captures. If the bishop captures us, then we capture with the queen, checking. The king would have to run to here. And then we don't want to bring our queen up and check here. We probably have to go ahead, check there with the rook. Then if the rook captures, our queen captures. So a few interesting possibilities in this problem. Now let's go back and look what happens if we check with the rook, but the king runs. Well then, then it looks a little trickier. Our queen would have to check, but what is the best way to do that? Looks like here, checking, but then now the bishop can block. So now things are getting trickier here. All right, We have a tougher one. I bumped the level up to 1000 to 1500. The previous perpetual check patterns video that I did, the level was at 500 to 1000. And I thought maybe it was a little bit too easy. And you kind of have to find that balance. You don't want problems to be too difficult or too easy. Because if they're too difficult, then you're working more on calculation ability, unless you want to do both. All right, I'm thinking we go here. It looks like we're all right if the bishop captures, but what if the king runs? That is the problem. Well, let's find out before the video takes too long. They captured anyway. So check, and now we can go here, and this is a very important pattern where there's a pawn here and the king runs around the pawn. The king will have to go here, the queen can go back and check, and the king will just have to go back and forth between these two squares, and the queen goes back and forth between these two with a perpetual check. You just have to make sure that one of these pieces, like the queen especially, is not somewhere like here where it can block and stop your attack. All right. Well, let's move on to the next problem. I hope you're doing well so far. All right. We're looking. Look at the material first. Obviously, we're behind here by 2 pawns in a rook endgame. So what can we do? Well, how about, of course, checks first. So if we go here, attacking the king will be forced to move, but to where? Down here. And now, do we have a follow-up? If we check with this rook, the king can move here or here. And then if he goes here, what can we do? We might have to bring our other rook into the game. All right, let's get on with it here. Check, check. Now we might have to bring this rook back to here. And if the king runs, then we can use our other rook, and we repeat this process. So interesting perpetual check pattern there. I don't think I've ever seen that pattern before, so I found that one to be pretty interesting. And if the king goes this way, well, then we have this rook, or maybe even this rook. Either one could start running that king around. All right, on to the next problem here. We have a queen centralizing. Material is definitely better for black with this extra rook. So how do we get the perpetual check? Looks like probably have to take this pawn. The king could run up here, but what happens if he runs here? So capture, king runs here. we have to decide whether to go so here, here, then from here we have to decide, well, I think the only thing we can do is go there. But what if the king runs out that way? That could be a problem. If the king runs out that way, we can check. The king could run forward. Then how do we continue to check? If we go all the way over here, but then the queen could block. This is a tricky one. Capture. If the king runs here, now what? That looks all right. Anyway, let's move on. All right, they decide to go this way. So we obviously have to check again. Probably here. Okay, I want to see what happens if they went the other way. So let's take a look at this. What does this look like on the screen? I went to this analysis board. Okay, so let's take a look at what happens if they would have done something different here. So we have the queen move, we capture. What if the king goes here? Well, now we would go there, and apparently it's mate in 2 if they go this way. Because of that check. Oh, and the only thing possible is that, then a mate. So there's an interesting little checkmate pattern as a bonus. And remember, this pattern is very important because we have the queen covering the sides, the 2 sides, and this diagonal through the middle. The only thing the queen does not cover are these opposite side squares, center squares, out of the, all the squares around the king. And this is a very valuable pattern to know. If you can check the king on a corner, make sure the queen is protected. So great little pattern there. All right, on to the next problem. Pawn is pushing forward, getting closer to promotion. Let's look at the material. We have 1, 2, 6, 7 white pawns and 5 black pawns, so we're behind by 2 pawns. And of course, this one is getting closer to promoting, this passed pawn. How can we go for a perpetual check? We need to look at checks first. And it appears we will have to sacrifice, most likely. But, all right. Hopefully you found this. Pause the video if you need more time. But capture, pawn captures, queen captures with check. The king will have to move. Then we move back here, checking again, and just move back and forth between h3 and g3. So there we go. Now something else interesting maybe to look at is if we capture this, what happens if they try to run? Well, then I guess we could tear up these pawns. So one more thing, we'll pull up the analysis board. Let me go through this problem again. So this is how we initially played it, but if we look at the analysis and then we look at the original moves, and then here, if the king were to run, well then that would be a blunder. We can go check. King will have to go here. Oh, then we have check there because of this pinned pawn, pinned to the queen right here. The king will have to run. If the king goes to e2, it's a mate in 3. If the king runs to e1, then it'll take longer. What do they recommend here? Going after this pawn would be best right here, going after that. Oh, wait, that's a miss. Hold on. Queen to g3 check would be better. Okay, I almost messed that up. Now the king should run where? To d2 to keep the rook protected. But now we have capture. And it's not looking good here. The rook is under attack, so white would be winning shortly here. All right. And if you want to see it, they show this. Then we just capture. King to d1. Or if the king tries to run to e1, then we just put the rook here. End up checkmating. All right, back to the main problems here, the perpetual check patterns. We're getting a little bit too much into calculation here. So on to the next problem. We just had a capture. Our rook is under attack, but it's pinned by the queen. Not looking good for us. Okay, we need to capture that rook. So when you're solving these puzzles, look for checks, captures, and threats, both for you and your opponent. You always have to be aware of those. Checks first, because they're very forcing. So here the threat is going to be to maybe capture this. So we have to deal with that first, unless we have any good checks. If we go here, we'll just be captured. So take. Now that opens up the king for possible checks. But where? We have to make sure that if we check with this queen, we can go to any of these squares. Oh, not this square, but any of these squares on the back rank. The king will be forced. He's not going to want to block with the rook, or we'll just take his rook, so the king will be forced to go here. So that means, with that in mind, you'll know that you have to go here to check, and when the king runs here, we can swing down, checking the king from here on f4. If the pawn blocks by pushing forward, well, then we can capture here. Oh, we can't do that because of that queen covering that. So that could be a problem. But at that point, we're ahead in material. Well, let's see if there's anything better. Check. King runs to here. Check. The pawn blocks. And what now? Maybe we have to move down here and protect our rook and attack their rook. So okay, and that's as far as they went, because this will allow us, now we're ahead in material. He'll have to block. If he runs back to the back rank, we can just check again on the back rank. So he'll probably push this pawn. We can't take here because the queen is covering that, but we will be able to move our queen down here, attacking the rook. So that's a possibility. All right, on to the next problem. Maybe these are a little too complicated. If they are, feel free to leave comments letting me know if you would like to see easier problems. Or maybe for some of you they're not difficult enough. Just let me know what you want to see. All right, and if there's a specific type of chess tactic problem or pattern that you would want to see, maybe I can find those on chess.com and put together a group. Or, well, what I do, people talked about maybe using a script, and I apologize if I have some ahs and ums. It's because I don't think I could use a script because I just randomly pick problems. I set the parameters on chess.com and the type of pattern and the rating range, and chess.com will just select random chess puzzles. So then I try to solve them. I don't do them ahead of time. So I'm just solving them with you. So let's see here. We have the queen pressing down, attacking our queen here. We are behind by a knight here. And this pawn pair is pushing up the board. We need to do something here. But what? What can we do? This one looks pretty bleak for black here. Of course, we don't want to take. If we take their queen, the pawn is closer to promoting. Our queen probably needs to run. Oh, wow. So maybe this is where we threaten a mate and our opponent will have to attack us with a perpetual check. So this could be an interesting example. If we go here, we're threatening a mate on F1. So queen to A6, threatening a mate. Is there any way to stop that? If the knight tries to block, if the knight tries to block here, we just take the knight, renewing the threat. So our opponent will most likely have to just start chasing our king here, attacking, forcing us to move up. But then what? Then he'll go here. So back and forth. All right, let's do this. We go here, and now the checks start. So that was an interesting example of threatening a mate, and then our opponent used the perpetual check against us. And that's something you have to be aware of if you're trying to go in for a winning attack. Once again, that great pattern where the king goes back and forth around this pawn, and the queen just shuffles back and forth, delivering a check from here and here. Now, if we go here, and the king had run into the center, well, then I guess the queen could go here, protected by the bishop, and just continue to chase us all around. Okay, on to the next problem. Here we go. A passed pawn is moving down the board here, getting closer to promotion. Material-wise, we are down by a bishop. We have 6 pawns versus 7. So we're down a pawn and a bishop. We need to act immediately with some perpetual check moves. So the only safe check that we have appears to be our queen moving here. And if the king goes on to the back row, we can swing back up here. The king would have to come back to its original position. But what if we go here with check and the king goes there? Well, now maybe we could go here, checking the king. And if the king steps forward, we could push a pawn and try and mate. But then he could take... All right, let's move on with this problem. So check, check. So that's a little twist as well. And that's where these perpetual checks can become difficult and hard to see, especially if there's multiple options for this king to run like this. Now, ideally, you want to try and calculate these problems all the way out in your head. But I didn't want the video to run too long if I try to do that. So the only option is to go here. Now, do we take the pawn? Or do we go back up to here? Taking the pawn seems to be maybe a better move. This might be one we'll have to throw up the analysis board and look at that. Okay, let's take a look at the analysis on this one for sure. Okay, we go here. All right, first of all, the opponent moves. Then we go here. The king has multiple options. In the game, we had a retreat to the back rank. What's another option? The king could go up here. And then they recommend doing what I said, checking from here. Queen to h5. Then the king would go back to g2. All right, well, I'm not going to look through all these different variations. This could be something you might want to take a look at yourself and calculate out, put it on a board. But since we're trying to go over patterns, I'm not going to dig too deep into the calculations. Okay, here we go. We had just checked the king. This time we are ahead. Yes, we are definitely ahead in material, so white will probably be trying to get a perpetual check from us. Although this pawn is about to promote, so that's not looking too good. Maybe that is why we could end up losing, and we might need to perpetual check. So look at checks first. The only thing I see is the queen here, but it would be captured by their queen, so not good. Pawn captures. Now if the king captures, the king will kind of come out in the open. And we can chase it all around. So the queen will most likely capture. Then we can go onto the back rank with our queen. So pawn captures, queen captures. Now we just have to decide where. I guess if we check here, the queen could block. We could go back down, picking the pawn off. So this is a great little pattern as well. The queen would be forced to move here. We just go back and forth between these two squares as the queen goes back and forth between these two. So, all right, 9 problems. Let's try and get one more in here. And something else, it's when you do these puzzles and you're trying to work on pattern recognition, you want to select a group of problems that aren't too difficult. That way it's less calculation and more pattern recognition. And also you can get through a larger group of problems in a shorter amount of time. So, try and pick however many you want to do, 10, 20, more problems on an easier setting so you can go through them more easily and they're not as much calculation, but repeat them more than once, because if you just go through them one time, you'll more than likely forget most of what you saw. But if you repeat the problems, go through them nice and slow, then go through them faster, and then go through them again faster, and try and solve the problems faster each time until finally you can just look at them and within 10 or 15 seconds you're seeing the answer. All right, here we go. Problem number 10. A dangerous pair of passed pawns. This one is about ready to promote. So we're looking for that perpetual check. We could take the queen. That might be an option. And then if they capture, then what? We have this move. Check. The king could just take that knight, but if it does, then we pick off the rook and we would be able to stop the pawns. Okay. This one's a little more a little more difficult with some calculation involved. So if you're beginners out there, let me know if you need some more simple problems. If these are good, if they're not strong enough, also let me know. If we go here, we're attacking their rook, so they'll probably go ahead, take. We can check. We're forking the rook and the king. King will probably take the knight. We can take their rook. We're also keeping an eye on the promotion square. So I think that would work. Now, before you just make a move, you also have to look for any surprises. Or if there's any better moves. I don't know. I think that's the best way to go. So let's find out. That's another example of looking at those checks. Now that pawn is about to move. So maybe we try something like that. Oh, they don't like that move. Hold on. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Obviously, you don't want to go there because the rook would capture you. So we have to go there. And then I apologize for that. Another reason I should have calculated this out more, but I was trying to speed this video along and finish up here. That way the video doesn't drag on and on. Okay, now I think we can just check the king, and then we go for that perpetual because otherwise this pawn will promote here. So that unexpected check move made all the difference. And now what? If the king moves up here, what can we do? If the pawn pushes forward, then we just move up here. If that pawn goes there, we just move here, check, and go back and forth. The issue is if the king goes here, now what? Our only option is to swing out this way. The king could head out into the open, but that might be pretty dangerous because now we would be able to move here, delivering check, and then picking off this pawn, and that would be winning. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed those 10 problems, perpetual check patterns. And feel free to leave a comment if there are any specific types of checkmate patterns, tactical patterns like forks or pins. If there's something specific you'd like to see, maybe I can do a video on that in the future. I think my next video will be another simplification patterns video because I seem to be getting a good response whenever I do those videos. So, like I said, feel free to leave comments, like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.